What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Music with Mike. Today, I want to give you a quick explanation of mixing and mastering, the difference between the two, and whether or not you should bother to learn to engineer your own music. First, let's start with mixing. After the production stage, we need to put our song through what we call the post-production stage, and the first person who's going to handle your music is the mix engineer. Nowadays, it's common for most producers to learn at least the basics of mix engineering, like EQ, compression, saturation, gain staging. But even so, most producers will also opt to hire a professional mix engineer to make sure that their song sounds as good as it possibly can. In a nutshell, the job of a mix engineer is to take all of the different individual elements of a track, also known as stems, and process them so they are balanced with one another. Their job is to take several different elements that are doing their own thing and bring them together into one cohesive song. They do this by adjusting volume levels, compressing to make things less dynamic, panning things to the left or right, EQing so that different elements find their own space in the frequency spectrum and they're not fighting one another. And then once all of this processing is complete, they will sum it into one audio file instead of a bunch of different stems, and they will send that to a mastering engineer. Now, a mastering engineer will take that final summed up audio file from the mixing engineer, which we call the final mix down, and they will monitor it using various equipment and techniques and use different plugins to make sure that it sounds as good as it can on as many audio systems as they possibly can. You may listen to your track on your studio headphones and think it sounds awesome, but then you might take it out to your car and listen to it and it sounds like total garbage. This might be because certain frequencies sound really clear and really good on your studio headphones, but when you take them out to the car where the speakers are much bigger and further away from you, you may not give them the proper amount of volume you need to hear them on that type of audio system. There are many factors like this that mastering engineers take into consideration. The mastering engineer is there to find those inadequacies and fix them using various techniques to bring your song up to commercial loudness and give it that final polish. Once complete, they'll render out the final masters and send them to you in whatever formats you've agreed upon. So now that we have a basic understanding of the differences between mixing and mastering, you might have some questions like, is all of that engineering really necessary? Can I just learn to do this all myself? Is there a certain formula I can follow for this post-production process? And what the hell do you mean by commercial loudness? So let's start with, is it necessary? It depends on how seriously you take your music and what it is you want to achieve. If you just want to produce for fun with no intention of distributing your music or giving it to DJs to play or hearing it on the radio or hearing it side by side with commercially produced music, then no, it's not really necessary. But if you intend to distribute your music and be taken seriously, then yes, it is necessary. So now you might ask, can I learn to do this all myself? And the answer is yes, you can, but it won't be easy and it won't be cheap. Most people take a pretty long time to get their skills up to industry standard. And in order to achieve professional results, you'll also require certain software and hardware that can get pretty pricey. But many people do it, and they do get to a level where they're happy with their own mixdowns. Mastering, however, is something I do recommend you outsource. I personally have a fundamental understanding of mastering, and I'm okay at it. I've done it before, and I do it for some of my tracks, but I don't have the equipment or experience to really achieve a professional result. Also, if you spent 40 plus hours working on a song and you've heard every last iteration of it, you know where every little piece is. Every time you listen to it, you listen for all the small stuff and things that may, in the bigger picture, be considered not super significant. You tend to develop a bias, and this is where mastering engineers shine, because they will listen to your track for the very first time and immediately know what they need to do to get it up to industry standard. They come into it with fresh ears, with no bias and no emotional connection to all of the hours that were put into creating the song. Now, the one downside to outsourcing mastering is that you have to give up a degree of creative control. The final product is not always going to sound exactly like you hear it in your head. This is part of the whole demoitis thing. So if you're one of those people who wants to do everything themselves from start to finish, then maybe mastering outsourcing is not for you. Now, you might be wondering if there's a formula out there to achieve industry standard results that you can follow when it comes to mixing and mastering. And the answer is no, but maybe kind of yes. Every song is different, and you will need to approach it differently based on the sounds and the genre and the way everything interacts with one another. That being said, you can develop your own workflow. So developing your own workflow might be the order in which you do things, the plugins that you use, the presets that you save. In the end, though, mixing and mastering is as much an art as it is a science, and it shouldn't be approached as a one-size-fits-all thing. Now on to commercial loudness, and what the hell is it? You may have noticed back in the days of the iPod, or maybe I'm dating myself, but back when you had to source your music from different platforms, you may have noticed that you could listen to two different songs at the same volume setting on your iPod, but one might sound significantly louder to you than the other one. Different genres of music have different standards for how loud they are to be mastered. If you're mastering a jazz ballad, it's not as important that the song sounds loud as it is if you're mastering a big room EDM banger. That being said, you may notice that platforms like Spotify normalize the volume of all of the music on their platform. So even if there are two songs that are different genres, there's not going to be a huge dip or leap in volume from one song to the next. However, there are platforms like SoundCloud where they don't normalize the volume to a certain level, so you could be listening through a playlist of multi-genre music, and there's going to be huge leaps or dips in volume from one track to the next. Lastly, and I cannot stress this enough, no amount of mixing and mastering can make up for poor sound selection. Now, I've had people and students online who have said things to me like, oh, it'll sound better once it's mastered. You know, it's not that great right now, but once it's mastered, it's going to sound amazing. That's not necessarily true. Mastering is like that little layer of icing on the cake. No amount of icing is going to fix a poorly baked cake. If you don't use sounds and production techniques that align with the genre you're trying to create, then no amount of mastering and no professional mastering engineer is going to be able to make it sound like something it's not. So that wraps up my little overview of mixing and mastering. I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions or want me to go more in depth on anything I talked about here, please let me know in the comments. While you're on your way down there, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time.